think we can start. So I want us to put, I want us to see, or rather, I want us to bring TypeScript into Express, uh, Prisma and SQL Server. Like I want us to put all of these technologies together because, as I told you guys, we will not be writing JS in Express. We'll be using TypeScript with Express. So I want us to see how we can work with Express, TypeScript, Prisma, and SQL Server all together. Now, this guide, the guide that I'm showing you guys, is also available there in this GitHub repository, and I've shared the link with you for you to do this setting up step by step. Okay, it's a very simple setup. Of course, we have more complex setups than this one. We have more complex setups than this one, but this should be more than enough to get us started. So, the very first thing that you're supposed to do is to start by creating a package.json file. So remember, guys, we said if you don't have a package.json file and are going to use third-party dependencies, it's always very important that you make sure that you have this package.json file, uh, you know, so that you can be able to track your dependencies and, generally set up your project from there. So the command for setting up your package.json file is to run npm init flag y, and that's what I'm going to do. I'll jump here to the terminal and I'm going to run npm init flag y. So npm init flag y, this is going to set up our package.json with all the default options. And when we talk about all the default options, I think you guys know what we mean by the phrase all the default options. So this is our package.json file. You can see it has all of these things here. Okay, it has all of these details. I'm realizing we have extra details because this is a GitHub repository, but either way, don't worry about that. So the very first thing I want to do, I want to change the type from CommonJS to module because I want to use ES6 imports. Okay, this is the first thing that you should always do before you even install anything, before you even set up anything. You should always make sure that you change the type to module. That way, you are able to use ES6 imports. Now, with that out of the way, with the package.json created, the next thing that we want to do is this. We want to install the following dependencies. We want to install NodeMon, we want to install TypeScript, and we want to install a new tool that you guys have not heard of before called tsnode. So NodeMon is for our development server, for restarting our development server. TypeScript, we know it's here to add types to JavaScript and make our code even more safe. And then tsnode is a tool that allows us to execute TypeScript without converting it to JavaScript. Okay, so this tsnode tool is basically a tool that allows us to work with TypeScript without having to convert it to JavaScript. So remember, we say that the workflow for TypeScript is that you write your code in TypeScript, and then you use the TypeScript compiler to compile your TypeScript to JavaScript, and then you execute the generated JavaScript code using Node or using the browser or whichever tool you want to use, as long as it has a valid JavaScript engine. So you want to run npm install, and then the first tool is NodeMon, the second tool is TypeScript, and then the third tool is tsnode, and all of them we want to install them as development dependencies. Again, we'll not be using them in production. We will only be using them in development. Okay, so yes, you can install multiple packages at once like this: NodeMon, TypeScript, tsnode, and then you pass the flag there that you want them as a development dependency. Or if you want, you can install them one after the other. You start by installing NodeMon and then TypeScript and then tsnode. It's either way one and the same thing. So I'm going to copy this command: npm install NodeMon, TypeScript, and tsnode. And again, as I've told you guys, NodeMon is for restarting our development server. TypeScript is for adding types to our code and therefore making our code more secure and more type safe. And then tsnode is a tool that will allow us to execute TypeScript without having to convert it to JavaScript. Of course, maybe behind the scenes, tsnode is converting our TypeScript to JavaScript, but either way for us, that will be abstracted away. We will not have to convert TypeScript to JavaScript. tsnode will be doing that for us behind the scenes. And then we are installing all of those items as development dependencies. So after a few seconds, NodeMon will be part of our dev dependencies, same thing to TypeScript, and same thing to and tsnode. So NodeMon, TypeScript, and tsnode, and you can see all the packages have been added. Okay, added 50 packages, audited 51. You're not really interested in those, but you can see we now have, if we go to our package.json, you will see that under dev dependencies, we have NodeMon, we have TS Node, and then you also have TypeScript. Now, with those dev dependencies installed, the next thing is to set up TypeScript in our project, and we set up TypeScript in our project by generating the TypeScript configuration file. And generating the TypeScript configuration file is very simple. With TypeScript installed in your system, just run npx tsc flag init. Okay, again, all of these steps are outlined here. So even if you're not able to follow, either way, you're going to have this GitHub repository to see how to do it. So npx tsc flag init, this is going to install it is going to set up TypeScript in our project by generating the tsconfig.json file, and that tsconfig.json file is basically the file that will tell TypeScript how to behave in our project. So I'll jump here to the terminal and then execute this command npx tsc flag init, press enter, and just give it a few seconds and you will see it is going to generate the tsconfig.json file. And I really hope you guys are following. Okay, I don't want a situation where we are done and then because you are not following, you're now disturbing people who want to code. So here now we have our tsconfig.json file, which is basically the file that will tell TypeScript how to behave in our project. That's it. And now the next thing we're supposed to do here is to install Express in our project by running this command npm install express. So copy this and then jump to the terminal, and I want to execute npm install express and press enter. And as you can see, I'm installing Express as an actual dependency, as a production dependency. I am not passing this div flag as we did with NodeMon, TypeScript, and TS Node. I'm not passing that div flag. Okay, so this is going to install Express into our project, and we'll be more than good to go from there. So while that is happening, I want to create here a folder called src. So src is where all my code is going to live. Okay, so right now I want to do a lot of file organization because I want us to now write code like actual developers. So inside of this src folder is where all of my code is going to live. So I'm going to create here a file, index dot, now it is not JS anymore. We want this to be TypeScript. So index.ts, index.ts, like that, as you can see. And as we said here, I'm going to import something. Okay, I'm going to import the express function from Express. Okay, there's a certain. So I am importing here the express function from Express. And then I just want us to do a very quick setup here. So const app is equal to express. Okay, and now you can see we are getting this error when I invoke the express function. Even before I continue, you can see I'm getting this error. So you'll see this is going to be a very common error, guys, whenever we are working with TypeScript. So you will see here, for example, we're getting an error, could not find a declaration file for module express. We'll be getting this error a lot of times, guys. Okay, and it doesn't work for Express only. It is an error we'll also be seeing with other packages, JSON Web Tokens, JSON Web Token, Bcrypt.js, or any other fancy tool that you want to use, ZXC, VBN, the one that we saw yesterday. All of those tools, whenever we are using them with TypeScript, there's a very high chance you'll be getting this particular error. Could not find a declaration file for module, whatever that particular module is. So it could not find a declaration file for module express. It could be module bcrypt. It could be module ZXC, VBN, and so on and so forth. So to make these errors go away, you're supposed to install the type declarations for that particular module. Okay, so if you want to make this particular error to go away, you install the type declaration for that particular module. And the pattern is usually we run npm install at types / that particular tool, and then you install it as a development dependency. So for example, for Express, it's going to be npm install at types / express. If we get the same error for Bcrypt.js, it will be npm install at types / Bcrypt.js, and then we make it a development dependency because we will not need it in production. We only need it in development. If it's a package called XYZ, it will be npm install at types / XYZ, and so on and so forth. So for Express, because you're getting this error here, could not find a declaration file for this module Express, then to fix that particular error, you want to run npm install at types / express, and we want to save that as a as a dev dependency. So copy that and then jump here to the terminal and then run that particular command, npm install at types /express, and we want this to be installed as a development dependency. It's usually a very small package, depending on whatever module it is you're working with. It's not supposed to take too long, but yeah, you can see it's already done. So now, if we go back here to our file, once this installation is done, if we go back here to our file, at some point the error should go away. Yes, you can now see the error has gone away. Okay. And yeah, I want to set up the port. Const port is equal to, let me go with 4567. So const port is equal to 4567. And then we want to call the listen method. So app.listen. And then we pass in here our two parameters. The first parameter is the port we want to listen on. And then the second parameter is a callback function, okay, which will be executed as soon as your application, or rather as soon as your server starts listening on the given port. So I simply want to log here to the console, server running on port, and then, okay, let me just say here server running at http://localhost on this particular port. So you can see very simple and very straightforward. So server running at whatever port it is we have specified here. And guess what, guys? Now that we have installed the types for Express, so npm install at types /express, we can now import some of these Express types. So for example here, I can import the type of Express, for example. Okay, I can import this type request, and I can also import this type response. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We can say here, for example, app.get, maybe on the root, and then we have our route handler. Let me just use a normal function, or rather an anonymous function. That way we are able to move forward together. So it takes in two parameters. The first one is req of type request. Okay, you can see how beautiful it is with TypeScript. And then res of type response, like that. Okay, and then you can see here we're getting this error. Response is a type and must be imported using a type only import when this verbatim module syntax is enabled. Okay, simply to fix this particular error, just prefix this with type, like that. Type response, type request, and then type express, like that. So this is if you want to work with the types. Otherwise, I'm coming to discuss this in a short while. So if you want to work with the types, you can see how I'm doing it. Type express, type request, type response. So here, for example, if I want, I can type this as express, for example, and it will still work perfectly fine. So const app, and the type for it is express, is equal to the result of calling this express function. Okay, so save this, and here maybe we can send response.send, maybe a heading 1. Let us just create a users API, the same one that we were doing the other day. Okay, so users, we can just say here, welcome to the users API. And with that, believe it or not, we have set up Express with TypeScript. Now, guys, we learned about something known as type inference in TypeScript. Okay, so type inference in TypeScript is where TypeScript knows the type of that particular variable without us even having to use it. And it usually happens when you use a variable or a value in context. So here, for example, I can remove this express type, but either way, TypeScript will be able to know that this app is of type express. You can see when I hover on it, TypeScript is either way able to understand that this app is of type express. Same thing to this request, because you're using it inside of because you're using this particular request handler inside of this get method, then TypeScript can be able to know that this req is of type request without us having to do anything. Okay, you can see it is able to know that this req is of type request. Same thing to this response res, it is of type response, through type inference. You can see when I hover on it, I'm getting res is of type response. So if you're using something inside of its context, then TypeScript will be able to know the types of that particular thing, and therefore you don't need to explicitly define the type of that particular variable. Okay, so here, even here in this case, if we want to, we can get rid of this items over here. I was just trying to put that there to show you guys that we can get our types from there. So importing Express from Express like that, and then you are setting everything up. Okay. So we are using type inference. If somebody is still confused, we're using type inference to know the types of every one of these. Otherwise, if Express, or rather if TypeScript needs us to specify the types, I've now shown you where we can get them. And then the final thing for this step for configuring Express with TypeScript is to set up this script over here, a script for starting your server. So I will jump here to my package.json. Okay. I will jump here to my package.json, and then under scripts, I want to set up a script for starting my application. And we said you can call your script whatever you want to. You can call your script whatever you want to. Just make sure you use a correct value. So in my case, I want to execute nodemon, and then where is my entry file? My entry file is inside of src and then index.ts. So I can say here I want to execute nodemon src/index.ts like that. And then the name of the script. Let me just call this my script dev. You can call it whatever you want to call it. For mine, I'm calling it dev. You can call your script whatever you want to call it. Just make sure that the corresponding value is a correct one. Okay. And now, if we execute here, I'm hoping we've set up everything correctly. Okay, let me clear that. If we execute npm run dev and press enter, give it a few seconds, you'll now see that our server is running at this endpoint. Okay. Something is, I made a typo here. Sorry for that. So our server, yeah, and you can even see when we make a change, nodemon is automatically, restarting the server for us. So the server is running at this endpoint over here. And now if we click on that URL, for example, you will see that we are now here. Welcome to the users API, which is working perfectly fine. Do we have any questions up to that point? So that is how you set up Express with TypeScript. Okay. So from there now, setting up Prisma should be a very simple and a very straightforward process. But either way, let me just do that because last week I noticed that some things had changed in Prisma. So let me just work on Prisma as well so that you guys see me doing it and you're able to do it together. So let me stop the server. We have successfully set up TypeScript with Express. Now, we said the very first thing to work with Prisma is to start by installing Prisma, the Prisma CLI as a development dependency. So npm install Prisma, and you want to install it as a dev dependency like that. Npm install Prisma flag_d as a dev dependency. And of course, it will take a few seconds to install, but every single one of that second is going to be 100% worth it because we will not have to write any SQL queries. Okay. Now, while that is installing, I really hope you guys are getting what is happening here. We started by installing the following. Okay, let me just go back to the presentation here. We started by initializing a package.json file, and then we installed nodemon, TypeScript, and TS Node as development dependencies. Those are the tools that are going to make the development possible. Nodemon is going to restart our server. TypeScript doesn't need any explaining. You guys know what TypeScript is. And TS Node is basically the application, or rather the package, that will allow us to execute TypeScript without having to convert it to JavaScript first. And I think we've seen that happening. We've been able to execute TypeScript without converting it to JavaScript. That is how we got this response back. We were able to execute TypeScript without converting it to JavaScript, and that is thanks to this package called TS Node. And then to initialize TypeScript in our project, we had to set up that tsconfig.json file. And to set up that particular file, we ran this command npx tsa flag init, and it created our tsconfig.json file. Okay, we'll come back to that file later on. But after that, we installed Express, npm install Express, and then Express was installed as a dependency in our project. And then after that, we installed the types for Express as a development dependency so that you don't get those weird errors of could not find the declaration file and all of that. So that is the reason now why we have this npm install at types/express to install the types for Express. And then after that, we set up the script for starting our application. So dev nodemon and then src/index.ts. And you don't have to cram this. It depends on where your index.ts is living, or rather where your entry point file is living. It doesn't even have to be index.ts. You just need to understand which is your index, or rather what is your entry point file or something in those lines. Yeah, and then we wrote our first TypeScript code and it worked perfectly fine. Okay, so I don't need to go through that anymore. Now, if we jump back here to our terminal, you can see that Prisma has been installed as a development dependency. The next thing that I want us to do is to set up Prisma, or rather to initialize Prisma in our project with SQL Server as the database. Okay, so for that, you're supposed to run this command npx prisma init flag data source provider is going to be SQL Server. So running here npx prisma init flag data source provider, and I don't think this is new to any one of us. We've been doing this up until this point. SQL Server like that. So press enter, and this should do just that. It should initialize Prisma with SQL Server being the data source provider. And if we go back here, you're going to see that in a short while. We're going to have a folder called Prisma where we'll be able to write our models and everything. And also we'll also have another file which I saw yesterday, last week for the first time, prisma.config.ts. Okay, guys, you don't have to receive all phone calls. You don't have to be moving up and down during these classes, and then you start copying code and all of that. Please try as much as possible to put your phone on silent and focus on one thing. Are we together, guys? Yeah, please don't stop showing people that that will just be available if they want to access you. They also need to know that you also have a life going on, and they need to respect that. Either way, when I executed this npx prisma init flag data source provider SQL Server, you see what has happened. We have this folder called Prisma that has been generated for us, and then you also have this .env file. We are coming back to that, and then you also have this prisma.config.ts. Now, the error we were facing last week, as you can see under next steps, the error we were facing last week, actually the answer was just there with us. Okay, I'm going to come back to that, but I thought, okay, either way, I'll come back to explain to you guys whatever error you are facing with this. So for now, Prisma has been successfully initialized in our project with SQL Server as the database. So the first thing I'm going to do is to jump to my .env, because it is very easy to forget your .env file. I want to jump to my .env and change some details here. So for my DB, I'm going to say here express TS users. So this is the name of the database that I want to be created, express TS users. The user here is going to be, I think I remember I created a login called Irene, and then the password is going to be Irene 2025. I think I created such a username and a password last week, if I'm not wrong. And then before you forget, we are supposed to add the two items that I told you guys about to avoid getting those errors of could not connect and all of that. So you want to say here encrypt is equal to true, and then trust server certificate is equal to true. Guys, there is nothing new here. In fact, everything new that I was supposed to show you, we've already done it. That was basically setting up Express with TypeScript. But every other new thing that every other thing that I'm doing from here moving forward is basically something we've been doing from since God knows when. But I've already changed the database here to be express TS users. The user is equals to Irene, password Irene 2025, encrypt is equals to true, and then trust server certificate is equals to true. By the way, I don't need these comments. Let me just get rid of them. And then after that, okay, after you do that, there is one more step for this new setup. There is one more step. You're supposed to install this .env package, and then you add this import .env/config to your prisma.config.ts. So I had promised you guys that I will go do my assignment to check what has changed, but to fix whatever issues we were having last week, just install this .env package. I think you know what the .env package does, and then you add this line, import .env/config in your prisma.config.ts file to load all the environment variables from the .env. So let me copy that, and meanwhile I'll be installing it. So clear that, npm install .env. Okay, and then once that installation is done, we are supposed to add this line to your prisma.config.ts. So where is that? Prisma.config.ts. We add this one line at the top. Guys, that is the only new thing that has changed in Prisma. Do you have any questions up to that point? This is the only new thing that has changed in Prisma. Okay, so if you want to deal with the issues we were having, just run npm install.env and then add this line, import .env/config. Now, let me open my Postman. I want us to just use the same endpoints we had last week. Okay, I don't want to start creating here new endpoints. I want us to use the exact same endpoints that we had last week. But if I can remember well, while Postman is opening, where is my schema.prisma? Prisma and then schema.prisma. If I can remember well, the name of the model was user. So model, the name of the model was user, like that. Model user, and then we are going to specify all the details here. Okay, so model user, and I want to confirm the details we had for the user. Just a second, guys, this is taking too long. But I remember we had an ID, which was basically a string. I don't know why autocomplete is not working, but we don't really care about that because you know the syntax. So ID was a string, and this was the primary key for this particular field. Okay, and we wanted this to be mapped to a name called user ID. User ID on the database, we want this to be called user ID on the database, or rather on the table, we want this to be called user ID, and we want to give it a default value. At default, the result of calling this UUID. Okay, so after the ID, we also want our user to have a first name, which is a string, and there is nothing new here. I think you still remember whatever we were doing here. We also want last name, which is a string, and we want this to be called last name in the database. Okay, we also want the email address, so email address is going to be a string, and in the database this should be called email address. Okay, and we also want this to be unique. We also want this to be unique because we don't want duplicate email addresses, so we want to make this to be unique. And then after that, we for performing soft deletions, we want this is deleted, which is going to be a boolean. Okay, and the default value for this is going to be equal to false. And of course, in the database, we want this to be called at map. We can just call this is deleted, something like that. So we have our ID, first name, last name, and email address. So anything that has a default value, the user doesn't have to pass that particular thing. So the ID has a default value, is deleted has a default value. So the only thing that we'll be taking from the user are first name, last name, and email address. Otherwise, I think we have two more fields that we wanted. Just a second, guys. We had two more fields here. I don't know why Postman is so slow today. Okay, the two more fields, if you guys can remember, were created at, which was date time, and in the database we wanted this to be called created at. Okay, and the default value for that is going to be equal to now. Again, there is nothing new about this. Sorry for that. And then finally updated at, which is going to be equal to date time, and in the database this should be called updated at, and we want this to be at updated at, like that. Okay, so this is going to be our users table, and then we want it to be called in the database at map users table, something like that. So at map users table. Yeah, and then from there we now run our migrations and everything is more than good to go. But before you run your migrations, make sure you change this generator part from this. So you make sure you remove this this line output, and then you make sure this is Prisma client JS. So it was Dandon Bovi and George who told us to do this, and it worked perfectly fine. So you make sure that you change. I even think I documented it here. You make sure you change from this to this. And of course, make sure you update your database URL, of which for me I've already done. My database URL in .env, it is more than updated. Everything is very much perfect. And then we now hope everything is okay and we run migrations. Okay. So pray for me, guys. npx prisma migrate dev flag name, and I can call this initial migration, something like that. In fact, guys, there is nothing new about whatever it is we are doing. Okay. This is something we have been doing up until this point, and it looks like it's working. Right? So SQL Server database created. Yeah. And it is even generating the client already for us. Okay. This is so cool. Your database is now in sync with your schema, running generate. And then once that is done, we are going to run npm install at prisma/client. I realized with this new setup, the Prisma client is not really installed automatically for you. But either way, I showed you guys how to deal with that. So generated Prisma client version 16, version 6.18.0. But if we go back to our package.json, you will notice under dependencies, actually it's already installed for us. It's already installed for us. So it's working perfectly fine. And yeah, folks, that is the end of the setup. Now we can start writing our API. Okay. So let me first of all change the port, because you can see here the port you are listening to here is on port 5000. Okay. So allow me to also use port 5000 so that I avoid too much updating. So the port in index.ts. So inside of index.ts, and my machine is so slow right now, I don't get why that is the case. My machine is extremely slow, guys. I'm very sorry for that. So I want to change the port here to 5000. So port 5000, and then we run our script npm run dev. And now our script should be able to start right now. Npm run dev. And by the way, guys, before I forget, yeah, our server is running at this port. Before I forget, guys, this node module should not be tracked. You're supposed to go to your .git ignore and add node modules there. Okay, they've already been added, so no need to even continue looking at that. So node modules have already been added, and even our environment variables have been added to this .git ignore, so they will not be tracked with this .git. If we want to prove that, we can simply run here git status to see. You can see these are the only thing that Git is going to track. Git ignore, package.log.json, package.json, prisma.config.ts, everything inside of the Prisma folder, everything inside of the src folder, and this tsconfig.json. Otherwise, all the other things will not be tracked by Git. But now we are going to start writing our API. Now the first endpoint I want us to implement is an endpoint for getting all the users. Okay, so you want to implement an endpoint for getting all the users, and we want to use Prisma for doing just that. So I'm going to import here the Prisma client from at prisma/client. I think we all know what is happening up until this point, and then create an instance of that particular Prisma client. So const client is equals to new Prisma client like that. And then to get all the users, it's supposed to be very simple. Of course, it's always a good idea to handle any exception. So try doing whatever this is, and then catch any issue that might occur, in which case we just want to tell the user here a response.status of 500.json with a message that something went wrong, like that. So response.status of 500.json with a message of something went wrong. Otherwise, we want to call here client.user.findMany, like that. Client.user.findMany. And as you guys know, this findMany method, it returns a promise. So we want to use async await to handle that particular promise. So I'm going to say here async and then await. And of course, we know this resolves to this particular thing resolves to all the records that are being returned from the database. So I can just say here const users is equal to await client.user.find many, and then we do here a response.status of 200 to mean everything is okay, .json users. Remember, you want to follow the RESTful approach, and we said for the RESTful approach, the format for data exchange is supposed to be JSON. And I'm not using this request variable, so I'm going to prefix it with an underscore like that, so that you know, all these unused variables are handled. Okay, and now I just want to confirm that our server is running, because sometimes the server might be down. Yes, the server is running. And now if we try to get all the users, hit send over here to get all the users, sending request. Yeah, you can see we are getting back an empty array of users, which means everything is working perfectly fine. Yeah, that is how you set up Express and TS. But either way, let us finish writing up this API. It's going to be very easy. We want an endpoint for creating a user. So app.post, it will still be to the same URL /users, but we want here our function that takes in the request and the response, and then the body of that particular function. And again, our very boring try catch block, try and then catch any error that might occur, in which case we just want to send back this response. Okay, there's a pattern, by the way guys, there's a pattern for using this try catch block. I usually forget how to use this pattern, but I'll try to look into it. Now the first thing we want to do, we want to get the first name, the last name, and the email address from this request.body. So you can see here, we're going to get the first name, the last name, and the email address from the request body. Okay, so you can say here const, in fact, let me just first of all start by logging to the console.log this request.body, so that you guys see what you're talking about here. Okay, I don't want to just be giving you guys some magic values. I want you to see what we mean by this request.body. So if we look at this, our server is still restarting. There we go. And when we make a request to that particular endpoint, of course, nothing will come back because we're not sending back any response yet. But jumping back here, you see we get undefined. Yeah, I think we know why. We get here undefined. And we said the reason for this is that we need to convert the request body into a format that JavaScript can understand. And to do that, we're supposed to use a middleware known as express.json. So to use that particular middleware, we'll just say here app.use express dot, and then that particular express.json middleware. So this is going to be the middleware that will be responsible for converting the request body into a format that JavaScript can understand. This express.json. And now with our server working perfectly fine, we can hit send here. Okay. And when that is working, of course, we're not yet sending back any response. If I jump back here, you can now see we get this request body. First name, Laisha, last name, Parker, and then email address, that particular email at gmail.com. So because it is an object, and we know it has a first name, a last name, and an email address, I'm going to destructure those items from that request.body. Okay, so this is very simple. Here, we can say const something is equal to request.body, and I want to destructure those items. I want to destructure the first name, the last name, and the email address, like that. So I'm destructuring the first name, the last name, and the email address. And then now with that, I can now insert those three items into the database. So client, the client instance that we created, client.user dot create, not insert, dot create. Okay, and then you're supposed to pass here the data. And the good thing about TypeScript is that it will keep showing us an error. You can see here we get an error until we insert all the valid data. Okay, it will keep showing us this error until we have inserted all the valid pieces of data, of which in this case we know in our model we have a first name. We have first name, which we want to correspond to this particular first name that is coming from request.body. We also have last name, okay, which you want to correspond to this last name that is coming from request.body. And as you can see, we keep getting this error until you provide all the necessary details. So the final detail to make this error go away is going to be the email address. So email address is going to correspond to the email address that we are getting from request.body, and now you can see the error goes away. And then we said, according to ES6 object literal enhancement, when the key and the value are similar, you don't have to specify both of them, just specify one of them, and then JavaScript will take care of the rest. So I'm going to remove that. Same thing to this, I'll remove that. And then same thing to this, I'll remove whatever we have there. And then we know this client.user.create, it returns a promise. So we can use async and await to consume this particular promise. Async and then await. And this will resolve to the record that was created. So I can say here const created is equal to await client.user.create. And then once we are done, we do a response.status of 201 to mean something has been created. .json. Let us just pass in here the created user. Very simple. So response.status of 201.json, this particular created user. And now, if we come back here to where we are creating the user, if I hit send and give it a few seconds, yeah, look at that. The user has been created. Felipa, Osinki, the email, you can see all the other default values. ID has a default value, so no need to worry about it. Is deleted has a default value. Created art has a default value, and even updated art has a default value. And if I keep hitting send, I'll keep creating new records. You can see there we create another new record, Cecil Hauk. Hit send, you see we create a new record here, Sebastian Bailey, and so on and so forth. And now coming back here to getting all the users, if I hit send, you will see I'll be able to get all the users as an array of objects. Now, guys, I want us to have some organization in our project here. Okay, I want us to have some organization in our project. I don't want us to write everything in one file. I want us to split this into files. So the thing that I want to do, this logic over here, the logic for creating that particular user is usually what we refer to as the business logic of our application. Okay, so this logic over here for creating the user is what we're referring to, is what we usually refer to as the business logic. Same thing to this logic for creating the user and for getting all the users. Those are the business logics of our application, and usually we keep all of them in one folder or in one file. Okay, so I'm going to create here a folder. I just want you to follow my pattern. I'm going to create here a folder which I will call controllers. Okay, so controllers are usually where we write the business logic of our application. So you can see inside of SRC, I've created a folder called controllers. And then inside of controllers, I want to create a file, which I'll call user.ts. And don't worry, guys, tomorrow we'll still do, from tomorrow we'll be doing a full API that contains a lot of other features. So for now, just look at what is happening. So I have this folder called controllers, where now I'm going to have all the controllers to do with the user being put here. And basically a controller is nothing but a piece of function that deals with the actual business logic. So the first controller that I want to create is one for getting all the users. So const get users is equal to, and then we want that to be equal to this particular function here. So I want to cut this out of here and then paste it here. And look at that, guys. As you can see, we have started cleaning up our file. Okay, but if you look at our file on the other end here, we're now getting this error. So we don't know what client is. Express doesn't know what request is, and Express doesn't know what response is. Luckily, we know where to get all of those. So the first one that is the simplest to fix is this Prisma client. So import Prisma client, this one here, from @prisma/client, simply like that. And then we create an instance. Const client is equals to new Prisma client. I really hope you guys are following what is happening. And you can see that error has gone away. The error that deals with the error to do with that particular Prisma client. And then the next thing, I want to import the type for request and the type for response. So import something from Express. And this thing that I want to import is the type for request and the type for response. Okay, and we said you're supposed to prefix this with type because of the so-called verbatim imports. So import type request, type response from express, and then this req is of type request and res is of type response, like that. And now you can see our error goes away. Okay, and then the next function that I want is a function for creating a user, or rather the next controller that I want is a controller for creating a user. And now you can see what is happening. We're really cleaning our file here. Okay, we've really cleaned our file, which is a very beautiful thing. So you want here a controller, so const create user is equal to that particular function. Okay, and req is of type request, and then res is of type response. And you can see that is working so much perfect. And then now what I want us to do, okay, because you can see we have these functions here, get user, which is basically this function, and create user, which is basically this function. So we want to use these functions inside of our index.ts. So we said for you to do that, you're supposed to use ES6 imports and exports. So I'm going to export here, export const get users, and then export const create user, like that. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So now we've splitted our code into two files, which is a very good thing. It makes our code easier to manage, easier to read, and easier to reason with. So export const get users, export const create user, and that is from this controllers folder, the user.ts file. And now coming back to index.ts, we are going to import create user from, this is supposed to be ts, not js. So import create user from wherever that is, and you can see we are getting this error, which we are coming back to fix in a short while. So create user and get users, those two methods. Now this error that you're getting, you can see it is telling us all imports. Oh, okay. An import path can only end with a .ts extension when allow import. Okay, whatever error you're getting here, I've given you guys how to solve it here. Okay, that error, and you're going to get that particular error. I've given you how to solve that particular error. So you are going to put these two lines inside of your tsconfig.json file. Allow importing ts extensions to true, and then no emit to true. So if we copy these two and we put them inside of our tsconfig.json, okay, tsconfig.json, under compiler options. So under compiler options, somewhere here, okay, it doesn't even have to be in any order, but we just put those there. That will make the error to go away, believe it or not. So save that. So allow importing ts extension to true, and no emit to true, and now you can see the error has gone away. Okay, so now when we want to get all the users, we simply reference the get users method, like that. You can see I'm not calling that particular function, I am simply referencing it. And for creating a user, we reference the create user. Okay, we reference the create user. We reference the create user method, like that, or rather the create user request handler, or rather the create user route handler. And we confirm if our server is working, and you can see everything is still working perfectly fine. And now jumping back here, if I hit send, as you can see, I'm still able to get all the users. That is working perfectly fine. And even when I go to creating a user, hit send, you can see I'm still able to create a user. Now the next endpoint is the endpoint for getting a specific user. Okay, so we start by creating the logic for it. So now our code is much cleaner. By the way, we're not using this const client, so I can delete it because we're not using it and it doesn't have to be there. And deleting it also, as you can see, we're not using this import, so I can also get rid of it. And look at how I'm really cleaning up my file here. I can even put here a comment, users routes, something like that, just to make my code easier to understand. Okay, so yeah, the next endpoint is supposed to be an endpoint for getting a single user. So you want to export here a function. So export const get user. So not get users, get user, a single user is equal to this function. Okay. It takes in a request of type request like that, and then a response of type response. For now, let us just use here try response.send getting a user, and then we catch any error that might occur. In which case we just do a response.status of 500.json with a message that says something went wrong. And by the way, before I forget, guys, because we are performing soft deletions, I don't want to get deleted users. So I'm going to pass here a filter. I want to pass here a filter where is deleted property is false. Okay, so there is nothing new about it, about this. I'm just trying to get all the records where there is deleted property is false. That way, if something has been deleted, we don't fetch it from the database. And all of this is because you're following the soft delete pattern. Now, with our controller set here, the get user controller, I want to import it from this particular file from index.js. So we want here get user controller, and then now here app.get /users, and we want here to have a user ID. So /users /ID, and then we call here get user like that. Okay, so we need to get the ID of our user for us to be able to get whichever user it is we want to work with. So now going back here where we are getting a user, if I hit send, so you can see localhost 1.5000 /users / the ID of that particular user, and therefore we are getting here getting a user. And now we want to query the database against that particular ID. Okay, so we said whenever anything, because remember this ID over here, :ID, this ID, it corresponds to whatever ID we pass here, or rather to whatever ID the client passes to the URL. So he said if you want to get those URL parameters, you're supposed to use request.params. So if I just log to the console here, request.params, we'll be able to see an object containing all of those parameters. So request.params, and what I want to do now here is to send the same request. That way you guys see what you're talking about. So look at this. This is the ID we are talking about. So if I hit send and I get back a response, looking at the terminal, you can see request.params is basically this object containing an ID, and this is the ID that you're working with. So where is this ID coming from? It is coming from this request.params, this one here, /users / and then :ID. And now we can simply destruct that particular ID. So const ID is equal to request.params. So we are destructuring this ID from request.params, and then now we can get our user based on that particular ID. So you can just say here client.user.find. Let us use find first. We find the first record that matches two conditions, because remember, if a record has been deleted, we don't want to get that particular record. So our two conditions, we are going to pass them with the AND operator. And remember we said for AND operator, you pass here an array of objects where each object represents a condition. So the first condition is that the ID field should correspond to the ID that you're getting from. It should correspond to the ID that you're getting from the request.params. And then the second parameter is that its deleted property is supposed to be false. So if something has been deleted, we don't want to get that particular item. Okay, so its deleted should be false, and the ID should correspond to this particular ID. Now you can see here we're getting this type error, that this type ID, which is either string or defined, is not assignable to this type user where input with all of those blah 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 and all of that. Basically, what TypeScript is trying to tell you, because this is a TypeScript error, TypeScript is trying to tell you that this ID that you're getting from this request.params, it could be of type string, it could be of type number, it could be of any other type, boolean, and so on and so forth. But if we look at our model, where is that? If we look at our model here, under schema.prisma, you will see that our model wants the ID to be a string. So this should be very easy. Just convert this particular ID to match whatever it is you have in your model. So if in your model the ID is an integer, you'd convert this to an integer. If in your model the type is a string, like in our case, you convert this to be a string. So now we can say here, to convert something to a string in JavaScript is very simple. You just use the string method and then we pass in there our ID, and you can see our error goes away. And of course, this here returns a promise which resolves to the record that has been found, or null if you do not find any record. So we can use await and async to consume the given promise. Okay, so async and await, and then you can save this particular user to a variable. So const user is equals to that, and then you can check if we've actually found a user. Okay, if we've found a user, if we've actually found a user, we can return that particular user. So let us just say here, response dot status of 200 to mean everything is okay, dot JSON with that particular user. Otherwise, so in the else block, otherwise we just do here a response dot status, and if we've not found something, we usually use 404 to mean something has not been found. So dot JSON with a message user not found, something like that. So if we save this and we confirm everything is okay, yeah, I think everything is okay. By the way, you guys will notice it is TS node that is being used to run our application. Either way, let us execute this. So if we try to get this specific user, we will get here 404 user not found, because this is not a valid ID. But if we try to get here a valid ID for a user, maybe this Rafaela Sanford, so this is their ID. This is the ID of Rafaela Sanford. So copy that ID and then we pass it here to getting the user. So get user, and then we pass the ID of Rafaela Sanford. Pass that particular ID, and if we hit send, after a few seconds, you see we get our Rafaela back, and its deleted property here is false as well. Come again. These random names. Yeah, it is because of this. You can see for first name, it is this syntax. When you do something in Postman like this, for example, let us just say here foo, you can put your double quotes and then you open the first pair of curly braces and then another pair of curly braces. You can see I am nesting curly braces, and then when you type here a $sign, you can see you can get all of this random data. Okay, you can get a random bank account, a random bank account balance, a random bank account name, random Bitcoin, random Boolean, random BS. I don't know what BS means. Random adjective, a lot of random things. Have I answered your question, Kibet? Yeah, so this is the syntax. Okay, so just type $sign and then you'll be able to see all of those things. But yeah, that is it about it. Let us now look at how we can update a user. So last week we did not see how we can update a user. Okay, I left it as to be as an assignment to you. But today I want us to look at how we can update a user. So again, for that, we want to define a controller for updating a user. Okay, so we can have here export const update user is equal to this function that is going to, let us use here try. Okay, we need here a request and a response. So request of type request, okay, request, and response of type response, exactly. And then here we can just send a dummy response dot send updating a user. And then we want to catch any error that might occur, in which case we just do a response dot status of 500.json with a message that says something went wrong. Yeah. So now that you're exporting it, export const update user, we want to import it from here. So we import update user, and then we set up a route for that. So we said if you want to update a user, you're supposed to use the patch request. So app.patch, and of course we need the ID of the user that we want to update. /user / the ID of that particular user, and then we call the update user method. So save that, and then I want to update the same user, the same Rafaela user. That was the ID of Rafaela, and when we hit send for this patch update, you see we get this response back updating a user. So now let us go ahead to implement the function itself. Now this one is a nice one. It's a tricky one. Okay, not really tricky one. It's a different one because you can see we need both the URL parameters and also need the request body. And even it's funnier because in the request body, we don't know what the user will give us. We don't know if the user is going to only update the first name. We don't know if the user is only going to update the first name or if the user will only update the email address. But guys, I'm going to show you a very nice trick through something known as short circuiting in JavaScript. Okay, so there is a very nice technique in JavaScript called short circuiting, but we will learn short circuiting when we get maybe next week, but one when we start going through React or something. Now, we now know where we are supposed to get our details. Okay, I don't need even to try and pretend that we don't know where we're getting those. So the first detail that we need is the ID, which is coming from this request.params. You can see here the ID from this params. Of course, it's going to be an object, so you want to destructure that particular ID. So const ID is equals to request.params, and then you also want the details from the request.body, which again you're also going to destructure. So this details is equal to whatever is coming out of the request.body. And what details do we want? We want the first name. So the user might give us a first name, we don't know about it. The user might also give us a last name, we don't know about it. And the user might also give us an email address, which we don't know about. And then after that, I'm going to use client. Okay, come on. Client.user.update. Okay, we want to update where. Okay, so you pass here a condition where we want to update where the ID matches the ID that you're getting from the request.body, from the request.params. And you can see how beautiful TypeScript is. It's telling us that, hey, for this update statement, you're not yet done. And guess why you're not yet done? Because you're also supposed to supply the data. Okay, so we also want to supply the data. So data is going to be equal to this. And now you can see the error goes away. If I try to remove this data, you can see we get an error. So TypeScript is a very nice development tool. You can see how it is telling us that, hey, you're not done with this particular method, and so on and so forth, helping us to remember some of these smaller details. Now, the user might want to update the first name, which you're coming to. The user might also want to update the last name, which you're coming back to. And also the user might want to update their email address, which we are coming back to. Okay, now the first name I'm going to use short circuiting to update the first name. So the first name I'm going to check if there is a first name. If there is a first name, then go with that particular first name. Okay, so this is the short circuiting syntax. So if there is a first name, then you go with it. If there is no first name, then don't even bother continuing with that implementation. Same thing to the last name. If there's a last name, then we want to go with that particular last name. And finally, if there's an email address, we want to go with that particular email address. And by the way, we don't want to update deleted items. Okay, so we can use this AND operator in that field as well. So we don't want to update the deleted items. So if an item has been deleted, okay, I don't think that will work here. Okay, let us just go with the string only. We'll come back to that sometimes later. So that is going to be our update operation. And then you can say here, of course, it returns a promise. So we use async and await to consume this promise. So async, await, and then we know that the updated user is what will be resolved here. So const updated is equal to await client.user.update, and then we send back a response. So we start by status code. We said we should always work with status codes in REST APIs. So because this operation was a success, I'm going to use a status code of 200.json of this updated user. Okay, so const updated is equals to this particular function, and that is what you're sending back. So save this, and if everything is okay, it's going to work perfectly fine. So the server is already running, and jumping here, so you can see the name for this guy. If you try to get the specific user, their ID is B whatever. You can see their first name is Rafaela Sanford. But now in the patch, in the update, okay, we're only updating the first name. First name set to Ellie, and we're not providing any other details. So if I hit send, after a few seconds here, you can now see the first name has been updated to Ellie, and then the last name is Sanford. And now, guys, you can see the work of this updated that field. So updated that will be equal to the most recent time that particular record was updated. That is the work of this. That is the work of this at updated that. By the way, guys, don't underestimate these two fields. They're very important fields. Created that and updated that. Okay, so please, you should never underestimate the power of those fields. So you have this at updated at, and now you've seen the work of this at updated at. It maps to that particular timestamp when the record was updated. And now if you go back here to getting that particular user, this ID, you'll now see it's going to be Li Sanford. So Li Sanford. And if you don't believe me, you can also try to work with the email address. So email address, maybe li at 2025c.com. Maybe just a dummy email like that one. And when we hit send, you'll now see that the email has been changed to eli at 2025c.com. If you also come back here to getting the user, okay, I don't know why Postman is so slow. You'll see the email was teres78@gmail.com, but if we hit send now, because we updated it successfully, we'll now get here eli2025c.com. Any questions up until this point, guys? So the final route, the final implementation is going to be the one for deleting a user. So export const delete user is equal to this function. We know it takes in a request of type request and a response of type response. Okay, so our boring try catch block. So try response.send deleting a user, and then we catch any error that might occur. Where we just do here a response.status of 500.json with a message user deleted successfully. Sorry, something went wrong. I'm just tired, guys. Sorry for that. Something went wrong. So now we are exporting it from here, and now in our index.ts, we also want to set a route. We also want to set up a route for that one. So for delete, we said it's supposed to be app.delete, okay, / users. And again, we also need the ID of the user that we want to delete. I can just go with ID like that, and then we want here to be delete user method. You can see it has automatically been imported from. It has automatically been imported by Typescript and Express for us from /controllers /user.ts. If I jump here to the terminal, you'll see our thing is running, and I want to use this ID. I want to delete this Li Sanford. So just a second, guys. We use that ID, and if we hit send, we should get back a response like deleting a user. So again, if I want to access this particular ID, I'm going to use request.params. Okay. So if I want to access the ID, I will use request.params, and of course I'm going to destructure that. So const ID is equal to request.params. Again, we know that request.params is going to be an object containing all the URL parameters for this particular route. And then now because we're doing soft deleting, we'll not really be updating. We can just say here await client.user.update. Again, because you're doing this soft deleting, let me make this a sync first of all. .update, and then where the ID matches whatever ID we are getting from the request.params. Okay, and then the data is going to be this is deleted property set to true. And of course, we know this will return the deleted record. So const deleted is equal to that. And then because everything was a perfect success, we can say here a response.status of 200.json deleted, the deleted user. Now save that, and I hope our application is actually running. So we wait for the server to start. Yeah, there we go. And now if we delete this li user, if we send that particular request, you'll now see that li has been deleted. So it's deleted property set to true. So li has been deleted. And now if we try to get this li user, if we try to get li and hit send, you will now see we are getting user not found because li has been successfully deleted. Okay, and even when you try to get all the users, you can see we have here, so Sanford, I think, okay, either way, that is working perfectly fine. So yeah, I think that is it about it. Let me first of all start by formatting my code. Guys, it is always very important that you make sure you format your code. So you can just say here prettier. I have prettier installed globally, flag right, everything. Okay, because I want I don't like my code looking ugly. You can see my code has been nicely formatted, and even when I go to index.ts, the code has also been nicely formatted, which is very beautiful. And then I also want to format this schema. Okay, and we said for that it is very simple. We simply run npx prisma format. So npx prisma format is going to format it is going to perform formatting for this prisma schema, and now you can see this is looking far more beautiful. Do we have any questions? Any? Yes. Okay, update user here. Yeah, where we have data, yes. Yeah, as I told you guys, this is a technique called short circuiting. So what this AND operator does, it will check, do we have a first name? And if we have a first name, then it will use that particular first name. Same thing to the last name. It will check, do we have a last name? And if we have a last name, it will use that particular last name. If we don't have that particular item, if you don't have the item that we've specified, then the AND operator won't bother to continue executing whatever is happening. It will just ignore whatever we wanted to do there. So it will check, do we have a first name? Yes, if you have a first name, then it will use that particular first name. Okay, for now, just do this for now. When we learn about short circuiting, I'll come back to it in details. Sawa sawa? Sawa sawa, Dennis? Yeah. So for now, just use it the way it is, even in your own application. Whatever it is you're getting from request.body, try to use it like this. And then when we get to this short circuiting topic, I'll go through this in details. Any other question? Any other question? So in the afternoon, you guys are going to work on an API which must be written using Prisma and SQL Server and Express and TypeScript. That's a must. You must use Prisma, you must use SQL Server, you must use TypeScript, and you must use Express.js. It is going to be an API for some products. Let us just call this products. Now, a product is going to have an ID which will be a string, and it should be a UUID string. Okay, a product should have a name, the name of that particular product. So the default here should be UUID. Default UUID. A product should have a name, let us just say here product name, which will be a string. A product will have a description, so product description, which will be a string. Okay, a product will have the number of the units left. So how many products do we have left? So units left, which will be a string. And then we also want these other fields. Created at must also be there. Okay, which is going to be date time. Updated at must be there. Updated at date time. And then it will be up to you if you want to perform soft deletion. Okay, so let me put that comment here. I don't know, maybe something like this. If you want to perform soft deletes, of which by the way I highly recommend you perform soft deletes, then you'll also have here a field called is deleted sorry, which will be a boolean, and the default value for that will be false. So these are the fields that I want from you guys. So the product name, the product description, and the units left. Sorry, units left is supposed to be an integer. Okay, so product name, product description, and then the units left, and then you also want created at and updated at, both of which are supposed to be date time. Just do whatever I did here. Okay, created at date time at default now, and then also updated at, we also want the one for updated at. And then after that, we also want this is deleted. That is for those who want to perform soft deletions. If you don't want to perform soft deletions, then you don't need this particular field over here, but I highly recommend you perform soft deletes. And I want you guys to perform CRUD operations. I want to see an endpoint for getting all the products. I want to see an endpoint for creating a product. I want to see an endpoint for getting a specific product. I want to see an endpoint for updating a product. Updating a product. And then I also want to see an endpoint for deleting a product. So an endpoint to get all the products, an endpoint to create a product, an endpoint to get a specific product, an endpoint to update a product, and finally an endpoint to delete a product. Are we together, guys? So the deadline for this assignment is going to be today or tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Okay, so the deadline for that is going to be tomorrow morning